The rain had not let up since noon, and Daniel Reyes stood outside the glass doors of the diner with water running off his jacket, watching a 19-year-old in a name tag decide whether he was worth letting inside. The kid's name was Tyler. He had his arms crossed and his chin tilted up in the particular way people tilt their chins when they have been given a small amount of power and intend to use every bit of it. "Sir, this is a private event," Tyler said. "Grand opening, invited guests only." Daniel did not raise his voice. He rarely did. He glanced past Tyler's shoulder at the dining room, at the new paint on the walls, at the string lights he had picked out himself from a catalog 8 months ago, at the booths bolted into the floor by his own 2 hands on a Sunday when the contractor canceled. "I own this building," Daniel said. Tyler laughed. Not cruelly, exactly. The way you laugh at something absurd on the internet. Half a reflex. "Sure you do, man. Look, there's a shelter 2 blocks down. They do dinner at 6. That was when the manager came out from behind the host stand, heels sharp against the tile, phone already in her hand. Her name was Vanessa Cole, and she had been running this location for 11 days. She took one look at Daniel, soaked through, hair flattened, jacket frayed at the cuffs from a decade of wear, and she made the same calculation Tyler had made. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the entrance," she said. "You're disturbing our guests." Behind her, through the glass, 30 or so people turned to look. Servers froze, mid-step with trays in their hands. A little girl at a corner table pressed her face to the window, and Daniel's eyes found hers for just a second before Vanessa stepped fully into the doorway, blocking his view, blocking his path, holding her phone up like it was a badge. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave," she said. Daniel reached into his jacket slowly, the way a man does when he does not want to startle anyone, and pulled out a folded piece of paper gone soft at the creases from being carried too long. He did not unfold it. He did not need to. He had read it so many times he could recite it from memory, every clause, every line of small print, every place his own signature sat waiting, like a door left slightly open in a locked house. "Check the name on the deed," he said. "Then check the name on your paycheck. They're the same. If you have ever been judged by what you looked like instead of what you actually built, if you have ever stood outside a door you had every right to walk through while someone smaller than you decided you didn't belong, then you already know the feeling sitting in Daniel's chest right now. Stay with this one until the end, because what happens in the next 10 minutes is going to make you want to stand up and cheer. 10 months earlier, Daniel Reyes was exactly the kind of man nobody looked at twice. He worked the overnight shift at a commercial kitchen equipment repair company, the kind of job where you show up when everyone else is asleep and fix the walk-in coolers and the industrial fryers before the breakfast rush starts. He had done it for 6 years. He was good at it in the quiet, unglamorous way that never gets you promoted, only gets you relied upon. His daughter, Mia, was 7. Her mother had left when Mia was 2, and since then, it had been the 2 of them in a small rented house on the edge of town. The kind of house where the porch light flickers, and you learn to live with it because fixing it means spending money you don't have. Daniel kept the place clean. He kept dinner on the table by 6 most nights, even when his shift started at 11. He kept a drawer in the kitchen full of Mia's drawings, organized by month, because some habits are just who a person is. What almost nobody knew, because Daniel had never told him, was that 4 years ago his uncle had died and left him a small diner on the corner of 5th and Larch, not much of an inheritance in the way people usually imagine inheritances. The building was old. The kitchen equipment was older. The place had been closed for 2 years before that, gathering dust, gathering back taxes, gathering the kind of quiet decay that happens to buildings nobody loves anymore. Daniel could have sold it. A developer offered him $60,000 for the lot within a month of the will being read. He said no, without much deliberation, the way you say no to selling something that isn't really about the money. Instead, for 4 years, he rebuilt it. He did it in pieces, the way a man does something when he has no spare money and no spare time, only spare hours stolen from sleep. He fixed the roof himself, watching online videos on his phone propped against a paint can. He learned to lay tile, because hiring someone to do it would have cost more than he made in 2 months. He restored the counter, sanding it down by hand on Saturday afternoons, while Mia did her homework in the corner booth, swinging her feet, asking him questions about fractions he only half knew how to answer. He named it after his uncle. Cal's Diner. He kept that name even though nobody left to remember Cal would ever walk through the door again, because some things you do for the people who are gone, not the people who are watching. He hired a design firm, small and local, to help modernize the look, without losing what made it feel like something worth stepping into. He hired a general manager candidate through a staffing agency 6 weeks before opening. A woman named Vanessa Cole with a strong resume and a stronger handshake. Someone who talked about guest experience and brand consistency in a way that sounded, at the time, like competence. He hired her over the phone. He hired the rest of the staff the same way, through her, because he was still working nights at the repair company and did not have the hours in a day to run hiring himself. He trusted the process. He trusted the resume. He trusted, mostly, that people would do what they said they would do. That was his first mistake, though it would take a rainstorm and a locked door to show him exactly how large a mistake it was. Vanessa Cole had run 2 restaurants before this one, and both had closed. She did not put that on her resume, not because she thought it disqualified her, but because she genuinely believed neither closure had been her fault. The first restaurant had a landlord dispute, the second had a location problem, bad foot traffic, nothing to do with how she ran the floor. She believed, with the particular unshakable confidence of people who have failed upward twice, that she understood restaurants better than the people who owned them. Owners, in her experience, were investors. They wrote checks and stayed out of the way and showed up for photos at ribbon cuttings. That was the shape of the job as she understood it, and nothing about Daniel Reyes fit that shape. When the staffing agency sent her the file on the diner's owner, it had almost nothing in it. A name, a forwarding address, a note that he preferred communication by email and would not be involved in day-to-day operations before opening. Vanessa filled in the blanks with her own assumptions, the way people do, and the assumption she landed on was that the owner was some absentee investor, probably older, probably rich, probably going to show up once wearing a blazer and shake everyone's hand and leave. She never asked to meet him in person. He never insisted. Both of them, in their own way, let the silence do the talking, and the silence said different things to each of them. 6 weeks before opening, Daniel walked the site during the day for what he told Vanessa was a routine inspection. He came in work boots and a flannel shirt with drywall dust still on the sleeve from a job he'd done that morning, fixing a walk-in cooler on the other side of town. Vanessa gave him a tour, like she would give any inspector, brisk and polished, gesturing at the new POS system and the redesigned kitchen line. She did not know he had built that kitchen line with his own hands 18 months earlier, before hiring her, before any of this. She did not ask who he was beyond the clipboard he carried. He did not offer more than she asked for. He watched her talk about streamlining labor costs and optimizing table turnover and said very little, the way a man does when he is trying to learn something about a person by letting them talk. What he learned troubled him quietly. He noticed, walking the kitchen, that the fire suppression system above the main line had a service tag on it that was 2 years expired. He noticed that the walk-in cooler, the one he had personally repaired and calibrated before the renovation even started, was running 4 degrees warmer than it should have, which meant somebody had adjusted the thermostat and never logged it. He noticed a stack of invoices on the office desk from a food supplier he didn't recognize, priced almost 20% above the vendor he had contracted directly. He did not say anything that day. He took photographs, quietly, the way you photograph a crack in a foundation before deciding whether it is settling or splitting. He drove home that night and sat at his kitchen table long after Mia had gone to bed, spreading the photos out under the lamp, and he thought about his uncle, who used to say that the difference between a small problem and a big one is usually just time and neglect. He went back 2 weeks later, same boots, same flannel, and asked to see the maintenance logs. Vanessa, mildly irritated at being asked twice by what she still believed was some sort of contracted inspector or insurance adjuster, handed him a binder that was missing 11 months of entries. "We've had some turnover in kitchen staff," she said. "Paperwork falls through the cracks sometimes. It's not a big deal. Nothing's ever actually gone wrong. Nothing's gone wrong yet." Daniel said. She did not appreciate the correction. Something in her expression shifted, a small tightening around the eyes. The look of a person who has just been quietly disagreed with by someone she assumed had no standing to disagree. "I've run 2 other restaurants," she said. "I know how these things go. The fire system inspection is scheduled for after we open. It's just budget sequencing. And the coolers with intolerance, I checked it myself last week." Daniel did not argue. He had learned a long time ago that arguing with someone who is confidently wrong rarely changes their mind, and it never changes the facts. He wrote down what she said, word for word, in a small notebook he kept in his jacket pocket, the same notebook he used to log serial numbers and repair dates on refrigeration units. Then he thanked her for her time and left. That night, he called the fire suppression company directly, using the account number from the expired tag, and asked them to send someone out that week. He paid for it himself quietly, without telling Vanessa who had actually placed the call. He also called the food supplier, whose invoices did not match his contract, and it took him 11 minutes on the phone to learn that the account had been switched 3 months earlier by someone claiming manager authority, routing orders through a distributor that happened to be owned by Vanessa's brother-in-law. He wrote that down, too. He did not confront her yet. He wanted more than a suspicion. He wanted the kind of evidence that does not bend when someone smooth and confident tries to talk their way around it. Because he had learned mostly from watching machines fail and get blamed on the wrong part, that people who are caught early always have an explanation ready. And the only thing that beats an explanation is a fact that cannot be explained away. Over the following month, Daniel kept showing up, always in work clothes, always introducing himself only as checking on the building when anyone asked. Most of the staff assumed he was a contractor or a health inspector. Nobody asked his name directly, and he never volunteered it, partly out of habit, partly, if he was honest with himself, because he wanted to see what this place looked like when nobody was performing for the owner. What he saw did not reassure him. He saw food cost invoices inflated by nearly a fifth. He saw 2 consulting fees paid out to a company that, when he looked it up, shared a registered address with Vanessa's home. He saw a part-time chef position paid at a salary rate despite working under 30 hours a week, a classification that, according to the accountant Daniel eventually hired to look at the books, existed for exactly one reason: to avoid overtime and benefits requirements while still padding a line on paper that looked like a full staffing structure. He saw the fire suppression system finally serviced, 3 weeks after he'd made the call himself, with the invoice for it submitted to him for reimbursement under Vanessa's signature as though she had ordered it. That last one sat with him for a long time, not because of the money. The money was almost nothing. In the scope of what the diner represented, it was the signature. Somebody had taken a thing Daniel did, quietly, to protect a building and the people who would someday eat and work inside it, and put someone else's name on it, turned an act of care into a line item for someone else's credit. He thought about his uncle again, about the framed photo in the office of the old man standing outside the diner the day it first opened, 40 years before Daniel was born, into a family that would end up scattered enough that only Daniel showed up for the funeral. His uncle used to say that a signature on anything, a check, a lease, a repair ticket, was a promise in miniature. You put your name on something, you were saying, "This is true, I stand behind it." Vanessa had taken that miniature promise and used it to cover for herself. Daniel called a lawyer. Not to sue anyone yet, just to understand his footing. The lawyer, a calm older woman named Patricia Alvarez, who had done legal work for his uncle decades earlier and remembered Daniel as a kid trailing behind him at the diner counter, listened to everything he laid out and then asked him one question. "Does she know who you are?" "No," Daniel said. "Do you want her to find out before opening night or after?" Daniel thought about it for a long moment, turning his coffee mug slowly on the kitchen table while Mia colored beside him, humming a song from a cartoon he didn't recognize. "After," he said. "I want to see what she does when she thinks nobody's watching." That decision, made quietly at his own kitchen table on an ordinary Tuesday, was the reason he was standing outside the glass doors of his own diner on opening night, soaked through, being told by a 19-year-old host that there was a shelter 2 blocks down. He had not planned to walk in unannounced, looking like exactly what Tyler and Vanessa assumed he was. The rain had not been in the forecast. His car had broken down 4 blocks away. An old truck with a temperamental starter he kept meaning to replace and never quite got around to, the mechanic's version of the cobbler's children going barefoot. He had walked the rest of the way in weather that soaked through denim in minutes, arriving at his own grand opening, looking by every visual measure Vanessa and Tyler had been trained by the world to use. Exactly like someone who did not belong there. He could have called ahead. He could have announced himself the moment he saw Tyler's face change. Instead, for reasons that were part curiosity and part 4 months of accumulated evidence sitting in a folder in his truck, he let the moment play out. He wanted to see, one final time, what this diner looked like when it thought its owner was nobody at all. Inside, at the best table in the house, a man named Walter Higgs was finishing a plate of the diner's opening night special. Walter was 78 years old, and though almost nobody in the room knew it, he was the reason the diner's original building had survived a demolition threat 40 years earlier. He had been Daniel's uncle's oldest friend, a silent investor in the building's original purchase, and though he had stepped back from any formal role decades ago, he still held a minority stake, a fact buried in paperwork nobody at the diner besides Daniel and his lawyer had bothered to read closely. He had come tonight as a guest at Daniel's personal invitation, sent quietly 2 weeks earlier, along with a short note. Walter had not told Vanessa who he was either. He had simply shown up, an old man in a cardigan, and been seated, without much ceremony, at a corner table that a server nearly gave to a larger party before a colleague redirected them. Walter had spent the better part of the evening watching. It was a habit from a long career running restaurants of his own, before he sold them off in his 60s, an old instinct that never fully switched off. He watched the servers rush drinks to tables that had ordered 10 minutes ago, while a family with young children waited 15 for water. He watched a boozer drop and pocket a $20 tip meant for someone else's table without correction from anyone nearby. He watched Vanessa move through the room with the practiced smile of someone performing hospitality rather than feeling it, stopping at tables that looked important and breezing past the ones that didn't. And, near the front, through the rain-streaked glass, he watched a soaked man in a work jacket stand quietly at the door, while a teenager in a name tag lectured him about a homeless shelter 2 blocks away. Walter set down his fork. He recognized something in the set of that man's shoulders, a stillness he had seen before in people who did not feel the need to raise their voice to be right. He watched Vanessa step into the doorway with her phone raised, watched her mouth the words, "I'm calling the police," and something in Walter's chest went cold and sharp at once, because he had, in fact, met Daniel Reyes exactly twice before tonight, both times briefly, both times at his own request during quiet visits Daniel hadn't publicized. He knew that jacket, he knew that face, even rain flattened and half turned away. Walter stood up so fast, his chair scraped hard against the floor, loud enough that 3 nearby tables turned to look. By the time he crossed the dining room, Daniel had already unfolded the paper. It was the deed. Not the whole document, just the front page, water-spotted now from the walkover, but legible enough. Cal's Diner, LLC. Owner of record, Daniel R. Reyes. Below it, stapled, a copy of the staffing agency contract bearing Vanessa Cole's signature on the line, acknowledging her employer's identity. Vanessa took the paper without really looking at it at first, still riding the momentum of her own certainty, already composing in her head the story she would tell corporate about the disturbed man who'd tried to con his way into opening night with a forged document. Then, her eyes actually landed on the name, Daniel R. Reyes. She looked up at him. Really looked this time, past the wet jacket and the flattened hair, at the calm, unbothered face of a man who had just watched his own staff try to have him arrested outside his own building. "This isn't," she started, and then stopped because there was nowhere for that sentence to go that didn't make things worse. "Check the signature," Daniel said. "You've seen it before. It's on your contract." It was Walter who reached them first, breathing a little hard from crossing the room too quickly for a man his age, laying a steadying hand on Daniel's soaked shoulder like he was confirming to himself that this was real. "Daniel," Walter said, and the way he said it familiar, warm, utterly without doubt. did more to silence the dining room than any document could have. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed once before anything came out. "You know him?" she said. "I've known him since he was 9 years old," Walter said. "I was at his uncle's funeral. I hold 6% of this building." "And you," he turned to her slowly, "just tried to have the man who signs your paycheck arrested for trespassing on his own property on opening night in front of 40 guests. The dining room, which had gone half silent out of simple curiosity a minute earlier, went fully silent now. Tyler, still standing near the host stand, looked like he wanted very badly to become part of the floor. Daniel folded the paper back up, unhurried, and slid it into his jacket pocket. He did not raise his voice. He had not raised it once this entire evening, and he did not intend to start now, because he had learned a long time ago that the loudest person in a room is rarely the one who ends up controlling it. "I'd like to speak with my manager," he said, privately, "and then I'd like to eat dinner in my own diner, if that's still possible tonight." It was Walter who answered before Vanessa could recover enough to, "It's very possible," Walter said, and there was something almost like relief in his voice, the particular relief of an old man who had spent an evening watching something he loved get quietly mishandled and had just found out, in the space of 90 seconds, that it was about to stop. The office in the back of the diner was small, barely large enough for a desk and 2 chairs, the same office where Daniel had spent so many midnight hours 4 years earlier, going over contractor quotes by lamplight. Vanessa sat across from him now, spine straight, trying to hold on to some version of professional composure even as the color hadn't fully returned to her face. Daniel set his folder on the desk between them. It was thick. It had been thick for weeks. "I'm going to ask you some questions," he said. "I already know most of the answers. I want to see what you say anyway." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "If this is about tonight, about the door, I want to say that was a misunderstanding, and I take full responsibility for how the staff—" "It's not about tonight," Daniel said. "Tonight just happened to be when I decided to stop watching quietly." He opened the folder and turned it toward her. The first page was the invoice for the fire suppression servicing, submitted under her name for reimbursement. "You didn't order this," he said. "I did. 3 weeks before you submitted it, under your signature." Vanessa's mouth opened. Nothing useful came out of it. He turned to the next page. The inflated supplier invoices, the routing through the distributor owned by her brother-in-law, the price difference laid out in a column his accountant had built specifically to make the math impossible to argue with. $22,000 over the contracted rate in 10 weeks, Daniel said, routed through a company registered to a relative of yours. "That vendor had better delivery times," Vanessa said, and even she seemed to hear how thin it sounded coming out of her mouth. He turned to the last page. The maintenance logs, side by side, the 11 missing months highlighted, the cooler's calibration record showing the thermostat adjustment made 3 days before his site visit, time-stamped, traceable to a login under her employee account. "You told me nothing's ever gone wrong," Daniel said. "You said that to a man you thought was an inspector because you didn't think it mattered what you told him. It mattered. Everything you say when you think nobody important is listening is the truest thing you'll ever say." Vanessa sat very still for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its polish. "You set this up," she said. "You came in dressed like that on purpose. You let your own staff humiliate you at the door. You let me humiliate myself in front of a packed room just to catch me in something." "No," Daniel said. "You did that part yourself. All I did was not tell you who I was. That's not the same as lying. You built the rest of it out of what you assumed I was worth, based on how I looked, standing in the rain." He closed the folder. "I'm not interested in a scene," he said. "I'm not interested in humiliating you further than you've already managed on your own tonight. But you're finished here, effective immediately, and my lawyer will be in touch about repayment of the funds you diverted. You have until tomorrow morning to clear your office." Vanessa opened her mouth once more. Some fragment of an argument still trying to assemble itself, corporate language reaching for a shape that could survive this, guest experience, optimization, brand standards, and finding nothing that fit. She closed it again. She stood, gathered her things from the desk drawer in silence, and walked out through the dining room without meeting anyone's eyes. past the tables that had watched the whole thing unfold 20 minutes earlier, past Tyler, who would be having a considerably more honest conversation with Daniel in about 4 minutes, past Walter, who simply nodded once at her as she passed, the kind of nod that closes a door rather than holding it open. Tyler's conversation, when it came, was shorter and gentler than he expected, mostly because Daniel had recognized something in him that he hadn't bothered looking for in Vanessa, the difference between malice and simple, unexamined assumption. "You thought I was homeless," Daniel said, not as an accusation, just as a fact laid on the table between them. Tyler, red to the ears, nodded. "Yes, sir, I'm sorry. That's not an excuse. We'd had a briefing about handling situations like that, and you thought a man standing in the rain, in work clothes, couldn't own the building he was standing in front of," Daniel said. "I want you to think about why that was the first thing your mind went to. Not tonight, not for me. Just sometime, think about it." Tyler nodded again, slower this time. "Am I fired?" he asked. Daniel considered him for a moment. The kid hadn't lied. He hadn't fabricated anything, hadn't diverted $1, hadn't put his name on someone else's work. He had made a snap judgment based on an appearance, the same snap judgment most of the room had made. The same one. Vanessa had built an entire management style around exploiting. "No," Daniel said. "But you're going to spend your next 3 shifts working the counter directly, talking to every single person who walks through that door before you decide what kind of person they are. All of them. Not just the ones dressed like your idea of a customer. Travels fast in a room full of people with nothing to do but wait for their food." And by the time Daniel walked back out into the dining room, most of the guests already understood roughly what had happened in the fragmented, half-accurate way that stories move through a crowd. A few of them actually applauded, quiet and awkward, the kind of applause that isn't quite sure it's appropriate, but happens anyway. Daniel gave a small nod and did not linger on it. He found Mia exactly where he'd left her before walking to the front door 25 minutes and what felt like an entirely different night ago. At the corner booth with her babysitter, a plate of pancakes in front of her, even though it was well past dinner and thoroughly evening. She had ordered pancakes because they were her favorite, and because Daniel had told her months ago that whatever she wanted on opening night, she could have because this place existed, partly because of every Saturday she had spent doing homework in a half-built dining room while he sanded countertops. "Dad," she said, looking at his soaked jacket with the particular concern of a 7-year-old. "Why are you all wet?" "Had to walk here," Daniel said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Truck wouldn't start." "Did you fix it?" "Not yet." "I'll fix it tomorrow." She studied him for a second longer, the way kids do when they sense something happened that they don't have the full shape of yet, and then decided pancakes were the more pressing matter and went back to them. Walter joined them a few minutes later, settling into the booth with the careful, unhurried movement of a man who had learned patience the hard way over 7 decades. He looked at Daniel for a long moment before speaking. "You let that go on longer than you needed to," Walter said, "at the door. You could have stopped it in the first 10 seconds. "I wanted to see the whole shape of it," Daniel said. "Not just her. The kid, the room, what everyone does when they think there's no cost to it." Walter nodded slowly, turning his water glass in a small circle on the table. "Your uncle used to do something similar," he said. "Not exactly this. But he used to say, the measure of a place isn't how it treats the people it wants to impress. It's how it treats the person at the door it doesn't recognize." Daniel looked toward the front of the restaurant, at the glass doors still streaked with rain, at the new sign above them lit up in the dark. CAL's Diner, the letters he'd chosen from a catalog 8 months earlier at his kitchen table with Mia asleep on the couch behind him. "I know," he said. "I was there when he said it. I was about her age." He looked at Mia, absorbed in her pancakes, syrup on her chin, entirely unbothered by anything that had happened 20 minutes ago, in a doorway 40 feet away, and something in his chest loosened slightly, the way it always did around her, regardless of what kind of day had come before. Walter cleared his throat. "I'd like to make a proposal," he said. "Not tonight, but soon." I still hold that 6%, and I've been thinking for a while now that this place could use someone on the board who actually understands what it's supposed to be. I'd like that to be you, formally, not just as owner on paper. I want you sitting in on decisions before they're made, not cleaning up after them once they've gone wrong. Daniel considered this for a moment, the way he considered most offers, slowly, without performing either enthusiasm or reluctance. I don't want a desk job, he said. I've got a repair route. I like fixing things with my hands. I'm not interested in becoming someone who reads spreadsheets all day and forgets what the kitchen smells like at 6 in the morning. I'm not asking you to stop fixing things, Walter said. I'm asking you to fix this, specifically. Keep your road if you want it, but this place needs an owner who actually walks through the door sometimes, not one who sends contracts through a staffing agency and hopes for the best. Daniel looked at the folder still sitting closed on the table beside him, thick with everything Vanessa had tried to build in the space his absence left behind. He thought about how easily that absence had been filled with something rotten, simply because nobody had been standing in the doorway to notice. I'll be here 2 days a week, he said, in the kitchen, not the office. I'll hire the next manager myself, in person, and I'll actually watch them work before I trust them with a key. And I want final say on anyone who reports directly to me, not the agency's pick. Mine. Walter smiled, the kind of smile that comes from watching something land exactly where you hoped it would. That's more than fair, he said. That's better than fair. That's how your uncle would have done it if he'd had the patience to write it down, instead of just knowing it. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, with the lunch rush thinning out, Daniel stood behind the counter of his own diner, wearing an apron over his work clothes, showing a new hire named Ramon how to properly calibrate the walk-in cooler's thermostat, the same one he'd fixed 4 years earlier. The same one somebody had quietly tampered with and never logged. Mia sat in the corner booth, the same one she always claimed as hers, doing multiplication homework with a milkshake sweating a ring onto the table beside her notebook. Tyler, still employed, still learning, brought her a fresh napkin without being asked and refilled her water without being told, a small, unremarkable act that meant more than he probably understood yet. Walter came by most Tuesdays now, not to manage anything, just to sit at his corner table and watch the room, the way he always had, the way that had once caught a small injustice happening at a glass door in the rain and refused to let it slide. Daniel finished with the thermostat, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked out at the dining room. Full booze, steady noise. A new manager, hired in person after 2 weeks of Daniel watching her work a trial shift shoulder to shoulder with the staff, moving between tables with the kind of attention that didn't disappear the moment she thought nobody important was looking. He thought briefly about the man standing outside the glass door a month ago, soaked through, holding a folded piece of paper that nobody had wanted to read. He did not think about it for long. There was a cooler to check, a daughter's homework to help with in 20 minutes, and a room full of people who had no idea how close all of it had come to falling apart before anyone noticed. That was fine with him. He had never needed anyone to notice. He had only ever needed the place to be right. He walked over to the corner booth, sat down across from Mia, and looked over her multiplication table while she worked through it, patient, unhurried, exactly the way he did everything else. Outside, the rain from 3 weeks ago was long gone, and the sign above the door still read, Cal's Diner, lit up steady against the afternoon light, the name of a man who had believed that ownership was never about the paper you carried, but about who was still standing there quietly, long after everyone else had gone home.